This next session is entitled, We the People. And we're going to explore the concept, the biblical concept of individual self-government. God is sovereign. A nation's people are the most free and economically flourishing when they are self-governing under God's laws and ordinances. In 1520, Martin Luther wrote a pamphlet called The Babylonian Captivity of the Church. And this was part of what ignited the Reformation in Europe, the reforming of Europe, the reforming of the church, the reforming of nations. And part of what he said was this: the works of monks and priests, however holy and arduous they be, do not differ one whit in the sight of God from the works of the rustic laborer in the field or the woman going about her household tasks. But that all works are measured before God by faith alone. Indeed, the menial housework of a manservant or maidservant is often more acceptable to God than all the fastings and other works of monks or priests, because the monk or priest lacks faith. I've heard an urban legend, I'm assuming it's an urban legend that came from Holland, of two Roman Catholic priests who, when they read this pamphlet and read these words, it was a supreme challenge to their lives and to how they thought of the church. A lot of the things that you're hearing me say are quite challenging for Christians and for the church. And this pamphlet, likewise, was very challenging to the church. And these two monks, after reading the pamphlet on the Sunday morning, they came in, they had the homily and they had the Eucharist and their normal service. And at the end of the service, they announced to the congregation that the doors of the church would be closed until the following Sunday. This was unheard of, because the doors of the church were always open. But they came to understand something in this pamphlet and with these particular words that changed how they saw their work as priests, changed how they saw the church, and what the Christian life was all about. And of course, the core of this is that we are saved by faith, not by works. And this was part of what radically changed Europe. Prior to this, a long time prior to this, a bishop, Eusebius, the bishop of Carthage, said something in one of his teachings that created a paradigm shift in the early church to make a distinction between the sacred and the secular, between Sundays and Mondays. It's what we call at the DNA and other places the sacred-secular divide. And it was Eusebius, the bishop of Caesarea, who led the way in this. He said there's two ways of life were given by the law of Christ to his church. The one is above nature and beyond common human living. wholly and permanently separated from the common, customary life of mankind, it devotes itself to the service of God alone. Such then is the perfect form of the Christian life. And the other, more humble, more human, permits men to have minds for farming, for trade, and other more secular interests, as well as religion. And a kind of secondary grade of piety is attributed to them. So these words, spoken early in the history of the church, created this sacred secular divide. The perfect life is the life of contemplation. It's the life of monks and priests. They have a higher and a sacred life because they are doing spiritual work, spiritual things. And they thus are socially and spiritually superior to everyone else. And then there's the permitted life, the active life. And this is the secular, the lower life. It's socially, spiritually inferior. This is the life of the homemaker, the laborer, the farmer, the shopkeeper. And now you have two tiers, the upper tier and the lower tier, the sacred and the secular. Whose life is closer to getting to heaven? It's the monk and the priest, because they are doing spiritual work. They're doing ministry work. Whose life does it take more good works to get to heaven? It's everyone else. It's the common people. It's the peasant. It's the homemaker. It's the gardener. And this is how the church thinks. And it thinks this way today. And it's one of the greatest barriers the churches have today to being impactful in our society. And you see a whole lot of people who have come to know Christ. Maybe they're a carpenter, maybe they're a fireman, whatever. They're doing active work, secular work, and they want to become more godly. Well, what do you have to do to become more godly? You have to become a pastor. You have to become a missionary, because now you're doing spiritual work. And that's better than doing secular work. So Eusebius and what he taught and others taught at this period fractured the church and created this sacred secular divide that has paralyzed the church until today. So you have a clergy-laity dichotomy. Even those words, clergy, laity. The clergy serve God, and they have a spiritual profession. The laity serve mammon. They serve money, and they have secular professions. But the Bible establishes something very unique that, when understood and practiced, has begun to reshape the world. It's the priesthood of all believers. In Exodus 19:16, in the ancient word on this, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This was a revolutionary idea. Each person would be held responsible to live before the face of God. There's one king. Who's the one king? the God of heaven, the creator of the universe. He is sovereign over all. And individuals stand before their sovereign God and creator for their lives and their work. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And then in 1 Peter 2:9, you have the New Testament version. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellence of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. This is the theme of Martin Luther and the Reformation. It's a return to the concept of the priesthood of believers. Who is sovereign? When you think of the concept of absolute sovereignty, who is sovereign? And each culture must answer this question. And the answer creates vastly different cultures and concepts of government. How you identify who is sovereign will create totally different cultures and totally different concepts of government. Os Guinness, again, in his book on our civilizational moment, says this: one foundational issue that must not be lost in this global discussion is sovereignty. The personal freedom, responsibility, and decision-making of citizens that are at the heart of human self-government. Local rule and a strong civil society and a genuinely thick democracy. I had to look up what he meant by thick democracy. I've heard of democracy, but I've never heard of a thick democracy. And what he's saying here is a democracy that's more than a shallow phrase. We live in a democracy, or we're, the Democratic Party. It's something that's as shallow, and Guinness is saying no. Democracy means something very different, very profound, and it has to do with this question of who is sovereign. There's a direct relationship between religious narratives and free societies. You see, it's not sacred, secular, and the church is over here doing its religious thing, and I'm doing my private religious thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian in the church building. I'm a Christian at home. No, none of that. This is not a privatized faith, a privatized religion. There is the larger story, and I live within that larger story, and I make decisions based on that larger story. And if I don't consciously do that, then I'm a Christian on Sunday, but not on Monday. Monday, I work by the society, the culture's story, not the biblical narrative. So sovereignty and governance. What kind of a government are you going to have? It depends on your concept of sovereignty. In the Judeo-Christian worldview, God is sovereign. And when God's sovereignty is honored, this leads to freedom. When individuals recognize that God is sovereign, that leads to freedom. Most secular societies, the state is sovereign. The state tells you what to do. And this is a reflection of the modern atheistic worldview that's governed Europe, governed North America, and led in other countries where people look at the state as all-powerful. The state is sovereign over all. I look to the state for my life, for giving me the things I need to to live. It gives me what I need, and I bow before the state to do what the state asks me to do. This leads to tyranny. When the church or mosque is sovereign, and this is often the case, Islam sees the mosque as sovereign, and periods of church history saw the church as sovereign, like in medieval times. This often leads to tyranny because the religion, whether it be Christian or Islam, sees itself as sovereign over the state, instead of the state being sovereign over religion. And then you have when man is sovereign. And this is what's running wild in the United States today. When man is sovereign, this is postmodernism. It's the old animistic worldview, and ultimately, it's wokeism today. I can even determine reality. I can determine what sex I am. And by the way, there's not just two sexes, there's 74 genders. And maybe next year there'll be 100 different genders because somebody else will see themselves as absolutely sovereign and they will make up a gender that's absolutely unique for them. So nations ultimately choose among freedom, tyranny, and anarchy, depending on their concept of sovereignty. What is your nation? What is your choice? Do you want to live in anarchy, in freedom, or under a tyrant? We the people, you have a choice to make. And there's a magical balance here. Nations become free because they believe and obey the gospel of the kingdom of God. The good news that the King is come to earth. There's a whole part in the book where I talk about Isaac Watts's hymn, Joy to the World. You notice in that hymn, Joy to the world, the Lord is come. It doesn't say joy to the world, the Lord has come. Very often we sing it that way. Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Oh, Jesus Christ came to earth 2,000 years ago. Wonderful. Isaac Watts understood something far more biblical. And he said, joy to the world, the Lord is come. You have here the eternal present tense. Not past tense, not future tense, but the eternal present tense. Who is the eternal present tense? Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ, the eternal present tense, is come. He came in the past, but he is come. He hasn't disappeared. And he himself, as we know in the Great Commission, says all authority in heaven and where? On earth belongs to me. He is King of heaven and earth. Obedience to his laws and ordinances bring freedom. Internal self-government based on God's moral law enables freedom-loving citizens to govern their own lives, families, churches, local government bodies, and institutions. In a God-oriented society of self-governance, you have freedom without anarchy and order without tyranny. And I encourage you to think long and hard about what I just said. You have freedom without anarchy and order without tyranny. What does that mean? What is that beautiful balance that we have from Scripture?